When I first dragged my suitcases up the cracked stairwell of apartment 4B, the last thing I expected was him. Tall, loose t-shirt, messy hair, eyes too tired and too gentle for this world. And annoyed, visibly, deeply annoyed, like my arrival was an inconvenience the universe had personally curated to torment him. "You're in the wrong place," he'd said, leaning against the doorway like a blockade. "No," I countered, shoving my phone screen toward him. "Lise. For B. You." He snatched my phone, squinted at it, then cursed under his breath, soft but sharp. Landlord mixed up the bookings. That was how I found out I had a roommate. A male roommate. A male roommate with a jawline sharp enough to slice through my entire sense of calm. We butted heads immediately over fridge space, over where the mug should go, over the shower that somehow always filled with steam only when he used it first. Everything he did irritated me. Everything I did seemed to amuse him in that dry, "You're ridiculous, but kind of entertaining" way. He hummed while cooking. I glared. He apologized for bumping into me in the hallway. I told him to watch where he was going. He laughed when I muttered under my breath. I slammed the door harder than necessary. But underneath it, beneath the static of irritation, there was something warm. Something I tried not to see. I only started noticing it the night I found him asleep on the couch, a book on his chest, the lamp still on. His face was peaceful, nothing like the guy who rolled his eyes when I reordered the cabinets or argued about cleaning schedules. Something about that moment tugged at me unexpectedly, like a string around my ribs tightening without permission. I brushed it off. I tried to. He made tea for me once when he noticed I came home sniffling. He handed it over awkwardly, like kindness embarrassed him. "I don't like mint," I said. "It's chamomile," he replied. Thought it might help. And I hated that my chest warmed more from his voice than from the tea. I didn't want to like him. I really didn't. Which is probably why, when a guy I'd been chatting with for weeks asked me out, I said yes. Loudly. Eagerly. In the kitchen. While my roommate stood next to the sink, pretending he didn't hear. "Hope it goes well," he said casually, rinsing his mug. "Yeah," I said, too brightly. "He seems sweet." He nodded, but his jaw tensed barely, but enough for me to notice. Enough to confuse me. I left that night trying hard to convince myself I was excited. Trying even harder to ignore the fact that part of me wished the person I was getting ready for was him. The restaurant looked beautiful, low-light, navy walls, candles flickering like they were trying to warn me. I should have listened. He waved me over with a grin that didn't match the voice I'd grown used to in our chats. His energy was jittery, loud, too sharp around the edges. "You're late," he said, even though I wasn't. I laughed awkwardly. "Traffic, sorry." He didn't respond, just flagged the waiter aggressively, snapping his fingers. My stomach tightened. The ordering was worse. He didn't ask what I wanted. He didn't even look at the menu. "Nah, I already know what's good here," he said, rattling off food I didn't recognize and 3 appetizers. When the waiter glanced at me, I opened my mouth, but the guy cut me off. "She's paying, by the way." I blinked. What?" He laughed, but it wasn't playful. It was dismissive. "Relax. Women say they're independent until it's time to prove it." My heart sank. In my head, the sweet guy I'd talked to for 3 weeks dissolved like smoke. But I tried. I really, genuinely tried. Maybe he was nervous. People have bad days. Maybe I could salvage it. Then he started talking about his ex. "Total bitch," he said mid-bite. "Spent so much on her. Thousands. For what? She left anyway. Women don't appreciate good men." I swallowed my drink hard. "I'm sorry you went through that." "Oh, don't be," he interrupted. "I've got better options now. Like you." He looked me up and down. My skin crawled. "And honestly," he added with a smirk, "you're way better than that dude you live with. Saw him when I picked you up last week? Skinny. Looks like if I breathed wrong, he'd snap." My blood ran cold. I never told him where I lived. Or that I had a roommate. "You saw him?" I asked carefully. "Yeah, I check your place sometimes. Just to make sure you're safe." That wasn't sweet. That was terrifying. I excused it because I didn't know what else to do. because I didn't want to believe I was actually sitting across from someone this wrong. Midway through the meal, he suddenly stood. "Bathroom," he muttered. He didn't come back. 15 minutes passed. 20. The waiter approached gently. "Ma'am, he said you'd be paying?" I shook my head quickly. "He is paying. Could you wait a little longer? Please." More time passed. I tried calling, texting, nothing. He had vanished. The bill was nearly $600. I could cover half. The other half? Impossible. Panic curled in my chest like a fist. I called every friend I had. "Sorry, girl, I can't tonight." "Oof, that's crazy. Hope you figure it out." I'm broke. Excuses, one after another. And I was alone in a chair that suddenly felt too big, too bright, too humiliating. I stared at my phone with shaking hands. There was only one person left. I dialed him, my roommate, praying he wouldn't pick up, praying he would. He answered on the second ring. "Hey." My voice cracked. I need help." A beat of silence. Then, "Where are you? Text me the address." "I'm coming. I also don't have money for the Uber home." He exhaled softly, not annoyed, just concerned. "Okay, I'll drive. Just stay somewhere well lit, all right?" When he pulled up, he didn't lecture me or ask why. He just opened the passenger door and turned the heat up because he knew how easily I got cold. The car ride was quiet at first, thick, embarrassed, heavy. Then he tried to soften it. "So, want to tell me what happened? Or want me to make up a dramatic story where you escaped a cult?" A laugh slipped out before I could stop it. "I think I went on a date with the cult leader." Slowly, haltingly, the whole mess spilled out. He listened, really listened. No judgment. No "I told you so." Just gentle nods, soft hums, the occasional joke to keep me from drowning in shame. By the time we reached home, something inside me had shifted. Because now, lying in bed, comparing the two men, the contrast was blinding. One made me feel small. The other made me feel seen. I tried not to think about it. Tried not to feel it. But the truth pulsed quietly in my chest. I was falling for my roommate. And it scared me more than anything. The morning after the disaster date, I woke up with a headache made of embarrassment and emotional hangover. I tried to avoid him. I tiptoed into the kitchen expecting silence, maybe an empty counter, maybe the universe granting me one small mercy. Instead, he was there, sitting at the table, hoodie on, hair messy in that annoyingly endearing way. 2 mugs of coffee in front of him, one darker, one lighter, the way I always brewed mine. He didn't look up at first. He just nudged the lighter mug toward my usual seat. "Thought you might need this." My chest did that stupid squeeze again. "Thanks," I murmured, sliding into the chair. The steam curled between us like a secret. He didn't try to pry, didn't try to force conversation about the night before. He just sat with me, quietly, steadily. And somehow that said more than any words. That was when the shift started, so small most people would have missed it, but impossible for me to ignore. He started walking a little closer to me in the apartment, laughing at my sarcastic comments longer than necessary, listening with this soft focus whenever I talked, like my voice filled an empty room inside him. And me? I started noticing everything, like how he always left the good part of the takeout for me without mentioning it. Or how he'd look at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention, those fleeting, unguarded glances that felt like warm hands on my ribs. We didn't talk about any of it. We didn't have to. The air in the apartment felt different, thicker, charged, magnetic in a way that scared both of us. One night, we ended up on the couch watching some random movie neither of us cared about. He had taken the corner seat, I'd taken the other end, and slowly, so slowly, it stopped feeling like two ends. He stretched out his legs. I retucked mine. Somehow, his foot brushed my ankle. And neither of us moved away. It was the most accidental intimacy of my life, and yet it felt inevitable. "Hey," he said softly once the credits rolled. "Yeah, just wanted to check you're okay. After everything." The sincerity in his eyes hit like gravity. "I'm okay," I whispered. "Better because, well, you helped." He looked away quickly, like the compliment embarrassed him. Anyone would've. "No," I said, surprising even myself. "Not anyone." A quiet smile touched his mouth, small, reluctant, but glowing at the edges. After that night, the friend dates began without us ever calling them that. Grocery runs where we ended up wandering the aisles for an hour talking about childhood memories. Walks to the coffee shop where he bought my drink before I could argue. Random late-night drives just because neither of us could sleep. We joked. We threw popcorn at each other. We cooked badly together. We slowly began fitting into each other's hours and moods and spaces. And somewhere between the inside jokes and the accidental touches, I realized something undeniable. I liked him. More than I should. More than I was ready to admit. But he never made a move. Not a single one. Not even when our hands brushed and he didn't pull away. Not even when we lingered too long in the doorway after saying goodnight. Not even when he looked at me like he was memorizing me. It drove me insane. He was either completely oblivious or trying painfully hard not to cross a line. And that uncertainty kept me awake more nights than I'd ever admit. By the end of the month, the tension felt like a third roommate, one who watched us constantly, waiting, breathing down our necks. I lay in bed one night staring at the ceiling, thinking about how easily I could lose this chance if I kept pretending I didn't want more. The thought terrified me, but losing him terrified me more. I knew then if he wasn't going to make a move, I had to. Even if it made my voice shake. Even if I risked everything. Because he wasn't the kind of person you waited for. He was the kind of person you chose. I didn't plan when or how I would confess. It wasn't some cinematic, candlelit moment. It was messy and human, exactly like everything between us. The tension had been building for weeks, humming under every shared meal, every accidental brush of fingers, every stupid joke he made just to see me smile again. He didn't know what he was doing to me. Or maybe he did, and was too respectful to assume. That night, we decided to get dinner at a little place down the block. A casual friend date, one of many. The kind where he would walk on the outside of the sidewalk without thinking, or order the dessert I liked to split, even though I always stole most of it. But when we sat down, something felt different. He seemed distracted. Hands fidgeting with the paper napkin. Eyes flicking to me, then away. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah," he said too quickly. Then, softer, "You look nice." I flushed. "It's just jeans." "Still," he murmured, "you look nice in anything." My breath caught. He didn't even realize he'd said it until his ears turned a little pink. He cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably like he wanted to rewind the moment. Everything inside me pushed forward. Tell him. Tell him now. But fear anchored me down. Dinner was a blur of almosts, almost touching, almost confessing, almost leaning in. We walked home in silence, the kind that vibrated with everything unsaid. The streetlights painted him in soft gold, and for the first time I noticed how beautiful he looked in that quiet, how safe. We reached the apartment door. He reached for his keys. And suddenly the weight in my chest was unbearable. "I like you." The words slipped out like they'd been suffocating inside me. He froze. Keys halfway in the lock. Shoulders tightening like he wasn't sure he heard me right. I swallowed hard. I know it's stupid, and I know we're roommates, and I know I probably ruined everything, but... He turned slowly, eyes wide, stunned in a way that terrified me. "Wait," he said, voice low. "Say that again." My heart pounded against my ribs. "I like you. More than a friend. More than a roommate. And if you don't feel that way, it's fine, I swear I'll..." He stepped forward suddenly, closing the space between us so fast it stole my breath. "You like me?" he repeated, almost disbelieving. His voice cracked not with fear, but hope. "Yes." My voice was barely a whisper. "I've liked you for a while." For a moment, he didn't move. Didn't breathe. Then he laughed, soft, astonished, disoriented, running a hand through his hair like his brain had short-circuited. "Oh my God," he muttered, eyes brightening with something unmistakably joyful. "I thought you didn't see me that way. I thought I was imagining everything." "What?" I blinked. "Why would you think that?" He exhaled shakily. "Because you're you. And I'm me. And every time we went out, I kept thinking maybe I misread it. That you were being friendly. That the friend dates were exactly that. I stared at him, speechless. He continued, almost rushed, and after what happened with that guy, when you said you didn't want to date another man, I thought, okay, don't screw this up. Don't be another guy who makes her uncomfortable. So I kept my distance. I didn't want to lose you. I didn't want to push. My heart twisted. He had been protecting me, respecting my words even when they weren't meant for him. He stepped closer, his breath warm in the cool hallway air. I've been wanting to ask you out for weeks, he confessed, voice trembling. But I didn't want to ruin what we have. I couldn't risk losing you. You wouldn't, I whispered. You don't. His smile, God, that smile, was soft and relieved and filled with a kind of quiet joy I'd never seen on him before. So, he asked gently, what now? I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. We start with one real date, I said, and see where it goes. His eyes softened, glowing like he'd been waiting to hear those words longer than he cared to admit. I'd really like that. Then, carefully, as if asking permission, he reached for my hand. His fingers brushed mine, slow, warm, deliberate. This time, I didn't pull away. We didn't rush it. Even though part of me wanted to leap straight into his arms and pretend we'd always been meant to be this close. But he insisted on doing it right. He said it with that sheepish half-grin of his. If this is our first date, I wanted to be a date you remember. So we planned for Saturday. And somehow, waiting those few days felt like waiting for a tide I could hear approaching but couldn't see yet. The apartment buzzed with anticipation. Not awkward, not tense, just different. Charged. Every glance lingered. Every touch felt like a promise. On Saturday morning, he knocked on my bedroom door like we didn't live together, as if he were picking me up from another place entirely. You ready? He asked, standing there in a button-up shirt that looked unfairly good on him. I nodded, suddenly shy. Yeah. Outside, the sky was overcast, the kind of soft gray that made everything look cinematic. We walked to his car, our hands brushing once, twice, until he finally threaded his fingers through mine. It was simple. It was everything. He took me to a botanical garden just outside the city. It wasn't grand or flashy, it was quiet and overgrown and private enough that my heart could settle between breaths. Why here? I asked as we wandered through the winding paths. He shrugged slightly. You once said you liked places that felt like secrets. I blinked at him. I said that once. Months ago. I remember things, he said, like it wasn't a big deal. But it was. It was huge. We walked slowly, talking about everything and nothing, stories from our childhoods, the way he hated thunderstorms, but pretended he didn't, how I used to write poems and never showed anyone. He listened like each word was a strand of something delicate he didn't want to drop. At one point, we stopped at a small wooden bridge that overlooked a pond. The water rippled with the breeze. Flowers peeked through the cracks of the beams. It was peaceful in a way that made my chest ache. You okay? He asked gently. I nodded. Too okay? He laughed softly. Good. We leaned against the railing, closer than friends would, not close enough for lovers, hovering in that perfect, fragile between. I like this, I said quietly. His voice dropped just above a whisper. Me too. After the gardens, he took me to a tiny cafe tucked behind a row of antique stores. The waitress knew him. The usual? She asked with a teasing grin. He blushed. No, I'll get something different today. She winked at me, and my stomach flipped. We ordered pastries and sat in a small booth where our knees touched under the table. Not accidentally. Not hesitantly. Just naturally, like the universe intended it. I caught him staring at me more than once. Every time I did, he looked away too late. What are you thinking? I finally asked. He hesitated, like honesty scared him just a little. You look happy, he said. And I like seeing you happy. Heat warmed my cheeks. I am. This wasn't like the fake sweetness I'd been fed by the guy before. This was genuine, careful, effortless. He wasn't trying to impress me. He wasn't performing. He was just himself. And that was more than enough. After lunch, we walked home slowly, taking the long route because neither of us wanted the day to end. He kept my hand in his like it belonged there. When we reached the apartment door, he paused. Turned to me. nervous for the first time. So, did I ruin the date? He asked lightly, but the insecurity flickered behind his eyes. You ruined nothing, I said, stepping closer. It was perfect. He exhaled like he'd been holding that breath all day. I wasn't sure who moved first. Maybe we both did. But suddenly, he was closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him, smell the faint cologne he only wore for special occasions. Can I? He whispered. I nodded before he even finished. His lips met mine softly at first, careful, like he didn't want to break anything. Then deeper, fuller, with a tenderness that wrapped around me like a second skin. When we pulled away, foreheads resting together, he smiled, quiet, overwhelmed, happy. I've wanted to do that since the night we watched that stupid movie, he said. Me too, I whispered. And that was how everything changed. The thing about falling for someone you already live with is that the shift is both seismic and subtle. Life didn't explode into chaos. The world didn't tilt off its axis. Instead, everything got warmer. Mornings felt different. I'd walk into the kitchen still half asleep and find him already there, hair messy, making 2 cups of coffee, one the way he liked it, one the way I did. He'd greet me with a soft, sleepy smile that felt like it belonged to me. He kissed my forehead once. Then once became twice. Then it became habit. Nights changed too. We'd end up on the couch after dinner, his arm draped casually behind me until I leaned into him without thinking. Sometimes we'd talk for hours, sometimes we'd sit in silence, comfortable and close, like our bodies had finally remembered something our minds had tried to ignore. The tension that used to hover between us, tight, sparking, confusing, slowly melted into something steadier. Something whole. We didn't hide anymore. One evening, about 3 weeks after that first real date, we wandered into a nearby street fair. Lights strung above us in warm loops, music drifting between the booths, the air smelling like fried dough and fresh paint from the artisan stalls. He slipped his hand into mine without hesitation. Is this weird? I asked, though not because I felt weird, just because I still couldn't believe this was real. What? Holding your hand. Being this, I said, gesturing between us clumsily. He stopped walking, tugging me closer. I swear the lights shimmered brighter around him. No, he said softly. This feels right. Don't you think? I looked up at him, at the boy who had annoyingly organized the cabinets wrong, who hummed while cooking, who listened to me vent about the worst date of my life without flinching, who held space for me in ways no one else had. It does, I said, voice barely above a breath. Good, he murmured, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. Because I'm not going anywhere. We ended up sitting on a curb near a quiet stall, sharing a warm cinnamon pastry he insisted was life-changing. It wasn't, but the way he fed me a piece definitely was. Hey, he said suddenly, licking sugar off his thumb. Can I ask you something? Sure. When did you realize you liked me? I laughed. Which time? He raised a brow. There were multiple? Oh, definitely. The first was when you made me tea even though you knew I'd probably make fun of the mug. He groaned. The cat mug? Don't remind me. And then I continued, smiling, you drove across the city to save me from that nightmare date and didn't say one judgmental thing. That's the night I realized, he admitted quietly. I blinked. Realized what? That? I didn't want to be just your roommate. Or your friend. That I wanted to be someone you could come to for everything. Even the messy stuff. My heart thudded, warm and heavy. And then, he added with a small smile, you laughed at my terrible cult joke in the car, and I thought, yeah, I'm doomed. I leaned my head on his shoulder, breath catching at the tenderness tucked inside his confession. We walked home hand in hand, tired and happy, the kind of happy that settles into your bones. And later that night, when we crawled into our separate beds, we both lay awake, close, but not touching, thinking the same thought. Why are we still in separate beds? The next morning, I knocked on his door without overthinking. He opened it instantly, eyes sleepy and soft. Can I come in? I asked. He stepped aside before I even finished the sentence. We didn't do anything more than curl into each other, my head on his chest, his arm wrapped protectively around my waist. It felt natural, like we'd done it 1,000 times in dreams. He whispered into my hair, "You know, I really thought you'd see me as just the guy who stole your fridge shelf." I smiled into his shirt. Turns out that was my type all along. His laugh vibrated through me. Warm. Safe. Home. He kissed the top of my head, whispering, "Good. Because you're definitely mine." In that moment, as the sun seeped softly through his curtains, illuminating the two of us tangled together in the quiet morning glow, I realized something profound. Love doesn't always crash into your life like a storm. Sometimes it arrives like a roommate with messy hair and mismatched mugs. Sometimes it grows in the spaces between arguments and shared groceries. Sometimes it softens you until you can't remember what it felt like to be alone in the world. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed.